Welcome to Wisconsin in Focus. I'm Benjamin Yount, filling in for J.D. Davidson, who has the day off. Tuesday was Election Day in Wisconsin, and voters went to the polls, some places in droves, other places not so much. We'll get to the voter turnout and just what was on the ballot first. But once again, we have another election in Wisconsin where we're talking about questions over election integrity. This comes from the town of Summit, way up in northern Wisconsin, Douglas County to be precise. The clerk there misprinted ballots. Some voters got a ballot that asked about candidates in the new 73rd Assembly District, while some voters got ballots asking about the new 74th District in that area. Turns out they should have gotten the opposite ballots. One of the candidates who was on the ballot, but not for the statehouse seat, even though she is the current state representative, a Republican by the name of Angie Sapik, blew the whistle on this. We wrote the story over at the Center Square, where she called for informational hearings in front of the Assembly's Committee on Campaigns and Elections because some voters got those wrong ballots. The quote that we used, "The ballot error in the town of Summit is a serious issue," she said. "Fortunately, the primary election results in both Assembly Districts 73 and 74 were wide enough in the town of Summit that the results could not have swayed the election." She added, "My concern is that residents of Summit may feel disenfranchised." She ended the quote with, "Had the election results been closer, we would be having a very different conversation." Sapik, by the way, chose not to run. She's the 73rd District Assemblywoman here in Wisconsin, but because of redistricting, she was lumped into a new district and chose instead to get elected to the county board. There's a wrinkle in the story on that here, too. But the takeaway here is, one, this is sort of what happens when you have a rushed redistricting approach. Remember, it was just earlier this year that the liberal majority Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled that the old maps, the maps that were used for the elections from 2022 on, were unconstitutional and could not be used. It left a lot of gaps, a lot of questions. Governor Evers' proposed maps eventually were the ones that won out, and they moved the lines slightly. We're not talking about large-scale redistricting. We're talking about things like making sure that Representative Sapik was drawn out of her district. For her part, the clerk up in Douglas County, a woman by the name of Casey Jo Lundgren, said that she admitted it, took full responsibility. Her statement was that her office is committed to transparency and accuracy. Our protocols will be thoroughly reviewed, and any procedures that are identified or could eliminate this type of error in the future will be implemented. The town of Summit is tiny. Douglas County is way out in the middle of nowhere. As Representative Sapik said, the vote count there didn't swing any of these races. But this is a statewide story because ever since the 2020 election managers in Wisconsin, both at the local level and at the state level, have been trying to quell questions about election integrity. This is a small snapshot of one more mistake, one more time when a clerk did something that wasn't the way it was supposed to be. Sapik's calling for informational hearings, as opposed to a hearing where they're looking to put somebody on trial or bring charges or get them kicked out of office. She said it's imperative that we uphold integrity and faith in our electoral systems. Any sort of meeting or penalty or action for Douglas County has got to be known to the public. That being said, she added, we're all human and we can make mistakes. Our job now is to make sure we have safeguards in place to assure that this doesn't happen again. The Wisconsin Elections Commission says there's no real precedent for this. They don't know how this has happened in the past. They don't know what's going to happen going forward, though those votes on the wrong ballots, in the wrong districts, for the wrong people in the town of Summit were essentially canceled, which, again, is a problem if you allow that to happen. Wisconsin has never been able to get over the hangover of the 2020 election, in part because election managers at the Elections Commission and in some of the clerk's offices across the state have refused to say that anything went wrong. They've refused to allow anyone to take a look at just what happened in 2020 with indefinitely confined voters or Zuckerbucks or Madison's Democracy in the Park. This is a very busy primary season. In fact, the unofficial voter turnout number is 26% statewide. That's the highest for a primary in 60 years. In other places like Madison, the city of, 45%, which is the highest in Madison since 1984. The ballot was chock-a-block full of legislative races. A couple of incumbents won, but lost, but that was mainly because they were put into districts running against other incumbents. Democrats are very excited to field a full slate of candidates, especially for the assembly, come later this fall, so we'll have to wait and see what redistricting does. There were some primaries for Congress, particularly up in the Green Bay area, where the Trump-backed candidate there won. In western Wisconsin, it was a Democratic congressional primary. The Democratic-backed candidate didn't win. There's a bit of a surprise there, but going forward, Democrats have already said they're going to work together. The big questions on the ballot on Tuesday were the constitutional amendments, and both of them failed. These are the amendments that would have put some limits on Governor Evers' spending power, thanks to a large voter turnout, particularly in places like Madison, and about $3.5 million in ads. There was a sizable no vote. 58% of people who voted on Tuesday said, no, we don't want to limit the governor's spending. Going forward, we're headed into what is going to be a very contentious November election. Wisconsin is once again the swingiest of the swing states. And so what we saw here on Tuesday is likely just a snapshot of what we're going to see, a preview of what we're going to see come November. We had 26% voter turnout statewide, 45% voter turnout in Madison. You can expect those numbers to be much, 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 much higher come November. And any problems like you have up in the town of Summit with wrong ballots, you can expect those problems to be magnified and more questions to be asked and more answers to be demanded. We'll certainly keep you up to date with this story. As soon as we know anything, so will you. You can find this story and others over at our website, thecentersquare.com. Please, thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe.